Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to this session on bridging the ESG skills gap. Apologies, we're starting a moment late there. We're just loading up the absolute latest thinking in responsible investment practice in our slide deck. So my name is Anthony Roberts. I'm Director of Investor Education. You may well have seen my video repeatedly in the plenary, but you probably won't have heard what I was actually talking about. And today is, or now is, the opportunity to find out why we consider investor education so important. So the theme of this year's conference is moving from commitment to action. And we believe, and we'll be presenting research today to show this, that the provision of training and education is one of the single most important things that investors can do to create meaningful impact, to drive responsible investment, and to ensure that they realize the benefits of their responsible investment strategies. So in this session, we'll be exploring the skill gap that exists. We'll be speaking and hearing from a number of asset managers around the room and asset owners as to how they are tackling that skills gap. And we'll be getting some research on the latest in understanding how training impacts responsible investment practice. So what's going on? Why is there the skills gap? Well, the drivers for responsible investment we're all familiar with. Materiality. People have increasingly recognized the materiality of ESG factors. No longer is there a question about whether clients want responsible investment. Client demand is there. And regulation is increasingly demanding more transparency, more disclosure from investors. So none of these are obstacles to action. And growing academic evidence supports the fact that ESG incorporation doesn't come at a cost. So what's preventing us taking action? Well, one issue is the skills gap. We all accept there is a pervasive skills gap in the industry. But one of the most interesting things is there's this asymmetry between the demand for ESG skills, so obviously this inflow of money, which is outpacing non-ESG funds. We've got 80% of asset owners across the world now implementing sustainability strategies. But look, on the other side, in terms of supply, recent analysis of 1 million investment professionals' LinkedIn profiles shown that less than 1% of them disclosed ESG-related sustainability skills on their profiles. And traditionally, we've conceived of this ESG skills gap as sitting at the experts at the top within the ESG teams. And a lot of the work of PRI focuses on providing them with the guidance and the support and the thought leadership to understand where ESG is going and how to develop their strategies and policies. But increasingly, we realize actually, to truly realize the benefits of responsible investment strategy, the whole organization requires a common knowledge and understanding of ESG. Those ESG teams are overwhelmed. They find it difficult to delegate to their organizations because people through the organization don't have the same language and understanding of the concepts. They don't understand what it requires for their role. And organizations can have the best ESG strategy in the world, but unless they can communicate that to clients, effectively respond to DDQs, answer those increasingly complex questions, they won't win the client inflows and they won't bring about the change and the impact that they were seeking. And we'll turn in a minute to some evidence which will be presented today as to why we think training is the most critical or one of the most critical aspects to realizing the benefits of responsible investment. Now, just to quickly point out, this diagram on the left is no judgment of operations teams. That diagram is built entirely looking at how the PRI Academy, our training offering, has evolved. And initially, sort of 5 years ago or so, we were only training the ESG teams. Gradually, organizations started training their investment teams because they need to make the investment decisions. And increasingly, they're now leaders in the field are training compliance, sales and distribution, operations teams. So their ESG policies permeate the people, the products, the processes, and of course, ultimately, the portfolios that they manage. So I will stop telling you the context and I will turn to some solid academic research, and I'd be delighted to announce or to welcome Yuxia Zhou to the stage. Yuxia is assistant professor at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. She's also a research fellow for the PRI. So Yuxia, please take the stage.
Okay. Thank you, Anthony, for the very nice introduction. So my name is Yuxia, which means rain and summer. So feel free to call me Serene if you like. And I'm an academic. So I believe this is the clicker for the slides. So I'm academic, and academics tend to make overwhelming slides. So if you ever feel in that way, please just ignore the slides and listen to me, please. Okay? Right. So today I'm going to talk about responsible investment training of PRI signatories around the world. As I start the presentation, I would like to do a quick survey in the room. So on the right-hand side of the slides, you see the PRI's reporting framework, right? So how many of you have ever reported according to the framework? Could you please raise your hand? Wow, more than half. Thank you very much. So for those who raised your hand just now, have you ever wondered how the report compared to your peers' reports? And how the reporting information predicting your past performance or reflecting your past performance or predicting your future performance? Curious? That's exactly the focus of my research at PRI. So today I'm going to present you some empirical evidence based on your report information to PRI with a focus on internal training that's also generated based on your reports. Okay, so first, it's very important to know when and where the data comes from. So along with the increase in our signatory base, we also have an increase in number of reports at PRI from slightly over 800 in 2014 to more than 2,000 in 2020. Okay. Geographically, we have huge variations. More than half or more, over 5,000 are from Europe. Okay. And then about 2,000 contributed by North America. In sharp contrast, we only have 21 reports from Middle East by 7 unique signatories. Okay, so we need to bear these huge differences in mind while exploring the current progress of responsible investment training among the signatories. Okay, in the reporting framework, if you remember, you are asked 2 questions about training. The first one is about whether you set responsible investment objectives about training, either on ESG incorporation or engagement. Okay, so this data starts in 2016. And as you can see on the slide here, actually firms are more likely to set objectives on training about incorporation than engagement. However, both follow the same trend where they increase gradually over time to 2019 and then drop very sharply in 2020 during the COVID years. Okay, interesting. The second indicator you are asked about is whether you implement the training in different levels of employees. Okay, so this data becomes available since the beginning in 2014. And then they also follow a very similar trend where they grow sharply gradually in the first years and then drop in the 2020. However, what is very interesting is the differences across different layers of employment. So the training is most prevalent among portfolio managers and specialized RI staff, whereas it's the least common among the very top decision makers, which are the boards. Those the board directors are only trained in about 15% of the firms. Okay. Then geographically, we also see very interesting differences. So for the target setting, you see here for both ESG incorporation and engagement, training is lagging behind in Latin America and Oceania. And here, Middle East is taking the lead, very likely because the 7 signatories in our PRI organization are the leaders in this area. When it comes to implementation, there are huge differences in where the regions place the different weights on the training. Since we're in Japan, let's focus on Asia. So in Asia, the employees are most likely to get trained at the portfolio managers and the CEOs, the C-suites, which is very different from other regions where the most likely to be trained employees are the ground level decision makers like portfolio managers and investment analysts. Now you may wonder, why do we care about this, right? Now it's time to introduce my latest evidence from my paper, Why Do Investment Companies Abandon Sustainability? Why do I have this question? Let me start with a graph. So this graph is probably not a stranger to most, if not all of you, right? So from this graph, we see that the prevalence of sustainable investment has been on the rise over the last decade. However, I believe most of you do not know the following graph. Actually, if we look at the light blue line here, since 2009, signatories already started to delist themselves from PRI. Okay, gradually over time, as of the end of 2021, over 1,100 firms already left PRI, taking away $10 billion of assets under management. Among these over 1,000 signatories, 30% left due to corporate restructuring reasons like merger and acquisition. We don't care too much about that because they left due to operations, and then we cannot really help that much. But the 70% left due to non-corporate restructuring reasons, which is really interesting and where we need to figure out the reason. So the research question I'm asking in this paper is, why and when do companies delist from PRI for reasons other than mergers, acquisition, or liquidation? Okay, so to conduct this study empirically, I basically match all the signatories to let them join PRI at the same time, and then estimate how many months each signatory is going to stay at PRI, depending on its initial characteristics upon signing up, and also changes in performance over time, using a survival analysis model. So due to the time limit here, I'll summarize my main findings. Essentially, the time of commitment to sustainable investment is actually depending on how much firms can realize the expected benefits. Okay, what are the expected benefits? Mainly three: to improve the risk-adjusted returns, to attract capital, and lastly, to enhance portfolio ESG performance. However, whether these benefits can be realized depend a lot on sufficient internal resources such as expertise and management control systems. Also, the external environment also matters a lot. For example, the support from PRI can elevate the internal cost for sustainable investment, doing sustainable investment internally. So in the following slides, I'll focus on the middle part, which is about how does the internal resources, specifically management control system, relate to the commitment duration. Okay, so how do I do that? Coming back to our reporting framework. There's one section you may remember called Strategy and Governance. So this section is very special because it is the only section that is compulsory across all firms in all years. So all the indicators here are about management control systems. So I collected over 100 indicators from this section for all the signatories, and then these indicators can be summarized into 17 principal components. Okay, so ex ante, do I predict these components to correlate with the commitment duration or not? Well, yes and no. Why yes? Well, because these are management control systems. So theoretically, they should be very important for firm to maintain a commitment, right? However, why not? No, because these are sustainability information, which unfortunately is relatively less reliable than financial information. So I don't have any strong hypothesis here. And interestingly, now is the time when the slide gets a bit daunting, okay? So so we have a series of principal components that those are the management control systems. The message is very simple. So just look at this column. It says the firms who chose to stay at PRI are significantly different from those who left, to the extent that they show better management control systems in every aspect, almost every aspect. However, we don't see this significant difference between the state firm versus those who left due to corporate restructuring, which are used as a placebo group here. Okay, so on this slide, training is summarized into one principal component. In case you are wondering about the specific indicators, the results are very similar, to the extent that the delisted firms consistently provide less training for all employee levels compared to those who chose to stay. When I examine them formally running regressions, I find that, interestingly, most of the indicators can predict future delisting. And when I put them all together, there are three indicators that have the highest predicting power. First one, individual accountability of the department head. Second, internal training on responsible investment. And third, internal assurance on reporting information. Okay. I also examine how the changes in these reported indicators affect the duration of commitment. The results are similar. However, what really stands out is the training. So training is the single most important indicator that can prolong the commitment duration in this analysis. So I think my time's up. So let me just summarize the key takeaways from these last 12 minutes. The first one is that we observe very significant differences on RI training across regions and also internally across different employment levels. Second, signatories that chose to stay at PRI consistently show better management control systems than those who chose to leave. Lastly, provide internal training is actually the single most robust predictor for long-term public commitment to sustainable investment. So that's all about my presentation. Thank you very much. I'm very looking forward to your questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Yuxia. It's incredibly impressive to be able to digest such complicated, robust research into just 12 minutes. It's also really exciting to see PRI data used in that way to create these insights that will allow us to fulfill that conference theme of turning commitments through to action. Now, I'm sure many of you have questions for Yuxia after that. I'm afraid we've got to keep this session running tightly to 1 hour, but Yuxia will be available after the session. I'll be about 2, and we're delighted to answer any questions you may have. So, having heard from Yuxia, having heard my introduction about the importance of training, it's now an opportunity to hear from you. And we'd like to hear your views on the skills gap. So we have a Slido question coming up. And really the crux of this session, the question is, how does the ESG skills gap impact your organization? So there'll be a QR code you can scan momentarily. We have 2 minutes each to look at that. So over to you. If you could think for the next 2 minutes and submit your feedback anonymously, how does the ESG skills gap impact your organization? Sorry, I said there was a QR code. I'm not sure there's a QR code. I think you go to the Slido app and follow the room, and the room is the Zuiko room. So please do submit as little or as much as you want. Remember, it is anonymous, and we really would like your feedback on this, because this will help us to continue to develop impactful products that help support or address the skills gap. So whilst you're all doing that, I'd like to turn to the next section. So over the next section, we have 3 asset managers and 1 asset owner who are representing a wide, diverse geographical and asset spread. But rather than having them on the stage talking to you about their experience, we've deliberately dispersed them amongst the room, as we really want to emphasize the fact that these are shared challenges and pain points. So each of these contributors has been asked in advance of this session to think about that question, which is, how is the ESG skills gap impacting their organizations, the industry more broadly? And then the next logical conclusion to that, if there are these problems that the skills gap creates, what are some of the solutions that they've found or that we need to see in the market to address these issues? So please keep answering your questions. Keep having our first question. I'll be collecting answers in a moment, and some fantastic answers are coming through. Really interesting results here. I shall come back and read some of these in a moment after we've heard from the speakers. So first, over to Dr. Xinting Jia. So Xinting is a ESG strategist at State Street Global Advisors. She's based in Melbourne, Australia. She works with clients right across APAC to help support the development of their ESG strategies and to develop bespoke solutions too. So Xinting, if you want to stand up at your table and talk for a few minutes about your experience. Thank you.
And really nice to hear the research shared by Yuxia as well. Interesting to see that there is regional divergence in terms of the training space. Some people focus on high-level training, but some people, some organization has focused on training the investment team. So I guess if I could quickly bring it up a notch a little bit. Thinking about through the course of the conference, we have heard about the ESG space has developed so quickly, in the past few years, and it's probably not going to change in the way of developing as well. And the ESG data space, for example, has evolved rapidly, and there's regulations as well. Used to be regarding the reporting requirement. It was mainly like market-led voluntary requirement. Coming to compulsory regulatory driven as well. And also there's different ways of investment teams integrating ESG. So all these challenges really, I think, bring to the table to a lot of organizations in terms of growing in sophistication in terms of incorporating ESG holistically across the whole organization. So that's the challenges we have seen. And within that challenges, I think the ESG skill gap is likely to be one of the major bottleneck. As we have seen with Yuxia's research shows that as well. It is not actually across the board. Every organization fully committed to the training. So how can we resolve this issue? I guess one solution, probably many solutions here. One suggestion is we could try to take a more top-down and bottom-up approach. Thinking about top-down approach. We also heard through the conference as well. Talking about the board-level commitment is so important. So senior-level commitment and support from the board level in terms of having put aside proprietary, proper resource and budget, to support training. And also pragmatically in terms of provide training to the board, to the investment committee, and different investment teams as well. So this is like the higher level. And thinking about the bottom up perspective, how we can go about it. You can think about probably general training for everyone. Now with the the board level commitment, that's likely, very easy to happen, I think. And also customized training for different teams, for example, thinking about maybe for investment teams, with the rising of so many different type of ESG data, this is one area should be focused on. And then for the compliance team, maybe focus on regulatory requirements. And other things, of course, I guess to make it more interesting, rather than make it a formal training, maybe some lunch and learn sessions, and to get, when you have food in the, in the room, it's likely easier to get people to come in to listen to the training, and also trying to embed it across the organization. Maybe not just the ESG team carry the heavy lifting. Think about inviting experts from externally to come and talk to the team. But also think about within the organization, likely within different team, there's people passionate about ESG, like ESG champions within different team, and for them to talk to their own team in the training may be more acceptable. It's more more buy-in from that. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for talking about your experience. Looking at the feedback coming in, much of that matches and echoes what you're saying in terms of the heavy lift that the ESG teams are expected to do, the difficulties in sort of creating that cultural change around ESG, ensuring that people can communicate effectively, and there's an expectation matches the deliverables that people have, and that certainly reflects some of the things you were touching on. Next up, I'd like to invite Hanna Edstroem, who is Executive Director responsible for liquid markets ESG at LGT Capital Partners in Switzerland. She drives their ESG agenda, including over investment, communication, and education. And she's a member of their ESG committee. Hanna.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, I'm not sure if this was the best way to sit. I'm always standing with the back, but bear with me. So yeah, thank you for that introduction. It was very interesting to see also the research part of it. And yeah, fully agree also to Xinting with the observing that, I mean, even for the ones of us, many in this room who work with this on a daily basis, it's so difficult to keep up with all the developments. So then thinking about the wider organization, of course, that has big implications, and we need to make sure that we bring everyone along. And I think one of the implications that we see for the wider industry with this skills gap is probably the insecurity. If you don't feel comfortable talking about something and you don't know the details of a topic, it's easier to avoid it than kind of look a bit stupid. And I think this has big implications, for example, for investments. When you're engaging with companies, if you don't feel that you have that right knowledge skill, you might avoid certain topics. And I think this is not just for the investment side, but it goes all the way from the board, executive committee, down to the analyst. If you don't feel that you have the right skills, it's easier not to really engage on it. So then the next question is, of course, what to do about it. And here I thought I'll just share some insights into what we have been doing and the journey that we are still on. So if we look back, I would say around 5 years, the first initiatives that we had, or for a long time what we did, was very team-based education. So if it's on the private market side or on the liquid side, on certain topics, but it could be on green gold or on mining, and very much learning on the job. But then we realized that this is probably not enough. It's so much happening with regulations, with the whole net zero commitment. We want our people in the organization to know what we're talking about. So the first thing we did was to create an internal education program. We thought we wanted to make something simple that people could easily digest. So we produced 15-20 minutes long videos that we put up on our intranet, and thought this is an easy way for people to take part of that content. We had around 750 FTEs, and the average uptake for these videos were around 100. That was not enough for us because, and we could also see that most of the people looking at the videos were the ones who were already interested in the topic. So we thought, okay, we have to take this a step further. And here also, at the same time, our chief risk officer got very engaged in the topic, with the whole regulatory landscape changing fast as well. So together we started looking around, what can we do to actually educate the broader members, or the broader group of employees. And we looked at different programs, pretty quickly got in contact with Anthony and started looking at the PRI ESG Understanding Responsible Investing course. And thought this was actually a really nice way of rolling this out throughout the whole firm, having everyone take part in the education. So we brought this to our executive committee, asking for approval. The main discussion that we had in there was who should actually be involved. Do we really want to do this across the whole organization? But if you think about ESG or responsible investing today, it really matters to everyone. If it's the IT people, I mean, the systems we're building up today, they need to be ready for this. If it's the salespeople, they need to be very fluent in speaking the ESG language. Of course, all the investment people, compliance. So in the end, the whole organization has to be part of it. And that's why we decided to roll it out across the organization, got approval for all the licenses. And I think it's also fair to say it takes a bit of time. So on average, 4 hours. So it's also quite, if you look at the overall organization, how much time people have spent on this, it's a bit of a commitment, or it's a big commitment. But now we started in June. We gave people 4 months to complete the course. And as of last weekend, that was the deadline, above 90% of the staff members have completed it. And in addition, we also informed our board about the training, and some of them have now reached out and asked to do it on a voluntary basis. So we already had a few of the board members complete the course as well. So that's a bit our journey. We're still just at the start. There are a lot more to come, but one step in the right direction.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, lots of that sentiment is echoed in the comments that have been coming back around having this common language and understanding, the understanding of what's expected of you in different roles to deliver ESG strategies. So it makes a lot of sense that actually you can't just confine this to limited teams. Everyone today needs to understand what responsible investment is. And actually at the beginning of your course, you have a video, I think, from your chief risk officer, and he makes the point that actually for investment professionals today, they should be as comfortable in the language of ESG as they are talking about markets and performance. And I think that's where we are with the mainstreaming of ESG, that everyone needs to be comfortable and familiar with that language to be able to answer client questions, to be able to explain your strategy, or to understand what's expected of you in your role. Now, of course, critical in this skills gap and bringing about action is the communication between asset owners and asset managers. So up next, we have Maria Clara Rendon from UPP, who is Director of Responsible Investing. So UPP is the University Pension Plan Ontario. There she supports the development and execution of their responsible investment strategy. And her career really has been focused on the implementation of responsible investing practices by both asset managers and asset owners. Maria, Clara.
Thank you very much. So I think I will agree with all the comments that we have heard. I have been reflecting about what has changed in the industry and what is driving the difference in the trends. And I think there are two things that have changed. One is who needs to think about responsible investing. And I will say in some cases it's about sustainability in general. And in other cases is what is the nature of the skills that people need. On the first side, what we have heard, it was just responsible investing teams who were thinking about responsible investing. For many years, a decade ago, we thought that was where things belonged. Now, as we talk about the real integration, we need investment teams to be fluent in responsible investing. We need compliance team, communications team, marketing teams. And that requires also a bit of an approach to understand to what extent people should use sustainability lens to think about their day-to-day jobs. So I think that's one component. The other is, for many years, the training was focused on what is ESG, what is the ESG, what is screening, what is integration, but that is also evolving. And now, as we get more sophisticated, we need to have skills to understand what ESG means in the context of valuations for real assets, for example, or in private markets, or climate change, or biodiversity. So I think those two things are important. And one aspect for us to have in mind is that we have been thinking, and maybe I will be combining the first and the second question in terms of what I'm seeing and what has worked. We have been intentional about developing a culture of sustainability. And I'm not saying a culture of responsible investing, I'm saying a culture of sustainability, because we want people across the organization to understand that every single role, procurement, HR, legal, has a role to play in the context of sustainability. So that comes from the top. We have a CEO who has been very intentional about embedding responsible investing and sustainability in the different process. But we have been also thinking about ways to involve the different teams. So in terms of the tactics, we have something that we call the sustainability minute, for example. And it's that every time we have an all-employee meeting, we will spend a short amount of time talking about something related to sustainability that may or may not be exactly applicable to the business. But we invite people from different parts of the organization to present topics that are maybe interesting to them. So one week we may have someone talking about food waste. And in another occasion, we can be talking about urban mobility. And you may not find a direct link to our investment process, but that is how we're inviting people or igniting conversations internally and externally about sustainability. And Anthony mentioned the relationship that we have with managers. When we are doing due diligence for our external managers, we ask about their training process, and we want to know who's receiving education, on what topics, and how often. And the rationale behind that is that we want to understand how fluent the investment team is and how fluent other teams are. We want to understand how systematic that process is. If it is regular updates, for example, if it is awareness about industry best practice, and it is also a way for us to start a conversation with managers and maybe engage on that topic, as we think there are opportunities for them to improve on their ESG training.
Thank you so much. I think that's really, really interesting, this idea of sort of storytelling to get people to think about things that are familiar or that they are passionate about, and then to apply that back to thinking about what the organization is doing, why ESG is important. And I think to create that passion, that sense of pride, those stories that people can tell is a really important part of training. Finally, I'd like to introduce Natalia Rajewska, at the back of the room. Natalia is Head of Global Sustainable Investing at Nikko Asset Management. She's responsible for building and overseeing their global sustainable investment team and the hub in Singapore, and is, of course, also in charge of providing solutions to clients and the various teams across the business. Natalia.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really not easy to go as the last speaker, so I'll try very hard to not repeat what was previously said. I think the challenges have been really well scoped by now. And at the same time, I think a lot of the solutions that we've been implementing, they are very much shared. So let me maybe bring a little bit more of the Asian angle. So I work for Nikko Asset Management. We are headquartered in Japan, but very much have a global footprint. And I think one challenge that we are seeing, and I know it's recognized by many fellow Asian companies and financial institutions, is that a lot of the leading ESG standards, they've been originally and historically developed outside of Asia. And it can mean that historically we might not always have been as close to them. And one really big difference that happened to us is that we actually had senior leadership commitment. They've committed that we will be looking at all of our operations and regulations that we have to meet in different regions. But we basically will decide what is the highest international standard on ESG, and we will be looking to meet that globally. And so having that top-down commitment has actually made really big difference. So let me come to now bottom up, because that's obviously really important. And I know a lot of these solutions have been discussed. So I think one really important thing is to acknowledge where we are. And it sounds very simplistic, but actually I think in ESG, it by far doesn't happen enough. So acknowledging where we are, what are those gaps, and how do we tackle that? One thing that we found works really incredibly well is collaboration with other departments. I think sometimes it might be a little bit quicker to just do, that ESG framework entirely by the ESG team, but actually when we co-develop this with the investment team, with a product, with different departments, then they also own it, and then they know what are the limitations, and they know, and they can quite quickly upskill themselves. And of course, we are there to support them through various trainings. As part of the kind of foundation building, we've been actually utilizing the PRI Academy for quite a number of years among the investment teams. But actually, when it comes to ESG skill gap, the first thing that really comes to mind that hasn't been yet quite discussed, I thought would be worthwhile mentioning, is a kind of broader phenomenon that we are seeing in the industry that's been actually coined by Professor Kim Schumacher, actually sitting right over there. It's been called the competence greenwashing. And it essentially refers to overstating ESG credentials. And I think that this is something that we do see happening in the industry. And I've seen this in many occasions throughout my career, that when you see those instances happening, it can actually make certain people very skeptical about the kind of broader ESG industry. So I actually think this is really important to look at and tackle. And Kim has defined it very well, but would be very happy to engage on that after this. So with that, I think it's really important to collaborate with the academia, whether formally or informally, but also very importantly, hire into the firms really deep ESG expertise. So this is also something that we've been doing, significantly growing our team and really focusing on hiring people with the right ESG expertise. And I think that's something that you'll have to continue working on. And speaking about commitments, going from commitments to action, I'll be looking to connect with Serene from NUS to see how we can work together. I'll end on that note. Oh, sorry, and to you. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalia. I think that's really interesting. We can see from our clients where there's that top-down support, that buy-in, that this is aligned with our strategy, this is why we need to do it, this is the expectation on you. It's an incredibly powerful tool to get people motivated to take the training. But I think also, as you point out, Natalia, having that bottom up and the collaboration and the sense of ownership over this, not that it's something that's being imposed on people, but it's something that they should be excited to be involved in. I think the storytelling that Maria Clara talked about, the approach that you have to collaboration is a really powerful way to do that. And I think absolutely this skills gap is a complex space. At the top, you have the experts who need deep training, deep understanding. Short courses are not going to provide that. But then there's this other skills gap further down the organization that is making sure people understand what those experts are asking of them, what the language they're talking in means, how to communicate or discharge what they're being asked to do in their role. So again, it's that top-down, bottom-up, and short training is no substitute for in-depth knowledge, professional qualifications, and experience, but it's a critical part of realizing the benefits. So with that, it won't have escaped your notice today that you're sitting in tables, and you've probably been fearing this, but the final part, we'd like you to have some discussions on your tables, and we'd like some interaction. So what we'd like you to do is discuss for 5 or so minutes on your tables, what are the biggest challenges that ESG incorporation you have, and how could training help with those? So what are the biggest challenges to ESG incorporation that you have, and how could training help support to address those? So just whilst you start those conversations, a couple of housekeeping rules. Please have your discussions under the Chatham House rule, so you can share the information that's been said, but don't attribute it to anyone. So please feel free to be open in your discussions, but don't share with anyone who said what at your tables. So we've got another 3 more minutes of table discussion, and then I'm afraid I have an ask too, which is if each of you individually after your table discussions could feedback on Slido as to what you found most insightful from that discussion. What resonates with you around the challenges that you're facing and how training could help to address those. So 3 more minutes, and then please feedback via Slido. I'm very hesitant to say it with such lively dialogue in the room, but if you could try and wrap up conversations in the next minute, start logging on to Slido and feeding back as much as you can. And this is really helpful insight for us as PRI starts to build and develop more solutions to help address this skills gap. Yeah. I'm so sorry to end this incredibly lively, engaged discussion in the room. But if I could call your attention back once more, there's lots of time over networking and so on to continue this discussion. So to finish the session, so the PRI Academy is the PRI's, or one of the PRI's, solutions to this pervasive skills gap. What we do is we take the thought leadership, the frameworks, the complex work that PRI does together with its signatories, and we turn this into short, practical, and applied training courses designed to build that common language we've all been discussing across organizations. So this is not a professional qualification. This is unashamedly industry training to rapidly upskill and give people that common knowledge and understanding of what responsible investment is. Now, we believe from all the discussions today, from the evidence that Yuxia has presented, that the PRI or the training like this is one of the most important things that organizations can do to move from commitment to action. And that's why the PRI Academy is now going to grow into a new function within PRI, investor education, where we will start to develop more products, more specialized products that help to support organizations in upskilling their staff, in creating that common language and understanding, creating that culture around responsible investment, and also deeper diving into some of the more complex topics that some of the expert teams are dealing with. So before you all go, we really do want to capture everyone in this room. We would like to open a dialogue with all of you. We need to understand better the challenges that you're facing so that we can help develop further solutions to that. So there is finally a QR code on the screen, the long-awaited QR code. If you zap this and fill in a form, we'll capture your details. We will give you trial access to our Understanding ESG course, or a demo of our Understanding ESG course, which is the course that Hanna spoke about that can be used very rapidly to build organizational fluency in ESG. And I really would welcome all of you to come visit us on the stand, to come speak to us and share the challenges that you're facing, and also to give us those insights to build really impactful educational and training products that help support this significant obstacle to action and ESG incorporation. So please do send your details here. And thank you all so much for attending this session. Thank you to all our speakers who shared their insights, their research, their experience. And thank you everyone for your lively engagement in the discussion. Thank you.